So I will get the recording started again. And we'll be hearing from Justin next on herbicide drift, actually. And Justin is our green infrastructure coordinator with the Nebraska Forest Service and the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum. This is a pretty pressing topic here, particularly with the new formulations of dicamba for dicamba ready beans. Here is a screen share from Justin of that Doug Tallamy book. Justin's going to talk to us a little bit about herbicide drift and what we're seeing. Oaks are sort of the canary in the coal mine for herbicide drift. They're one of the genus that really show those impacts first and dramatically. And so, Justin, if you would tell us a little bit about what we're seeing with herbicide drift around Nebraska.
Yeah, you bet, Graham. Thanks. Can everybody hear me? Am I on?
Yep, you're great.
All right. Hello, everybody. I appreciate this workshop tremendously. I love oaks. They're one of the best trees we can plant and use in our landscape. So I'm happy to talk about oaks. And I'm unhappy to talk about all of the problems we're seeing on oaks because they're one of our favorite trees. So, but thank you, everybody, for coming in today. As Graham mentioned, I do like donuts, and I already got a donut award this morning. I could live on donuts, and that's part of my problem. So I got to be careful. But boy, I dream of these, excuse me, these big apple fritters that I can eat on for a week at Hertz Donut here in town. So don't get me started on donuts. But I like donuts almost as much as I like oaks, and I really like donuts. So that means I really like oaks, I think. I like oaks so much that I agree with Alan on this recommendation, The Nature of Oaks by Douglas Tallamy. If you can get one book on trees this year, maybe look at Doug's book on oaks. I hope you can see this. It follows, I think it's a white oak that he has planted and followed, and he follows it throughout the year from October back to September. And it's really fun way to look at oaks and all the ecology and good stuff that goes on around an oak. And this whole concept of utilizing our native trees in our landscapes as much as possible really relates to oak trees. A single oak can host dozens, if not hundreds, of caterpillar species and other Lepidoptera or other insects that are really important to our songbirds and just our enjoyment of life. So I better get on with this. I'm gonna fly through this and keep it fairly simple, not get into any great detail, but we do need to talk about one of the big issues we're seeing on oaks here in Nebraska, and that is, I'm gonna pull this chat picture over here, herbicide damage. It is a serious and growing problem across Nebraska, but especially in the eastern third of the state and across the Midwest. Lori, David, and I are part of a couple working groups where we talk to people across the region, the Midwest region, and people are scratching their heads about what to do with our native trees because of the herbicide drift issue. In Nebraska, it's the biggest problem, primarily here in the east, where corn and soybeans are a problem. So primarily the eastern 1/3 of the state. Then southwest Nebraska, the McCook area has its own set of challenges because they work harder at keeping the fields clean in the summer. So there's another layer of herbicide drift there. It's not as bad in the Sandhills and out in western Nebraska, but it's still a growing concern. There are two sources for injury, lawn care and farming. And we've known about lawn care issues for decades now. Anybody dealing with community tree planting has watched some trees struggle in our community landscapes for years because of our infatuation with the lawns. Holy cow, what we've been talking about with the cemetery trees. We look at that in our lawns with lawnmower blight, trimmer blight, and then spraying of herbicides and insecticides and fertilizers that disrupt the way our trees grow. So we've known that for decades. But what we've seen with lawn care related issues is that's primarily a spotty issue, just a little bit here and there, not across an entire community. But it is also a growing concern, and we don't know exactly how much of our problem with oak herbicide issues is lawn care versus farming, but we know there is a significant amount from lawn care. So I like this old saying that Richard Lotus, the late Rich Lotus, a co-worker of ours here, said, "Show me a landscape without dandelions, and I'll show you a place where the trees are struggling, if there are any." And that's just whole around this concept of people hate the dandelions so much, they do everything they can to keep their carpet of grass clean. And boy, the impact that has on trees can be pretty significant over time. But let's not kid ourselves. We are in corn and soybean country here in the Midwest, and farming rules. It's a major important component of our economic way of life. So we're not going to vilify farming, but it is hard on our trees. And I'll summarize this quickly, but in the last 30 to 40 years, we've shifted away from tillage in terms of managing weeds in our farms to primarily no-till systems that rely on herbicide spraying every spring. They call that burn down, to get the farm fields clean from weeds. And then now there's a secondary use of herbicides even after plants emerge, crops emerge. So herbicide resistant soybeans and corn are sprayed over the top now in late May and June. And so this burn down and then this post-emergent spraying are really the issues that are driving herbicide drift into our trees across the region. We're not going to vilify farming in this message at all. It's the lifeblood of where we're at, but we don't want to shy away from what it's doing to our trees either. One of the problems with no-till farming is herbicide resistance. The first 20 years or so of no-till farming, we got by with Roundup, glyphosate primarily, to do most of our weed killing. And Roundup in this context is much less of a problem on our trees than are the growth regulator herbicides like dicamba and 2,4-D. But many weeds started to develop herbicide resistance, so they had to use growth regulator herbicides like 2,4-D and dicamba to help. And now it's an ever-growing kind of toxic soup list of plant herbicides that they have to use now to control more and more herbicide-resistant weeds. It's this herbicide treadmill concept of what's going on. Now, in agricultural circles, they talk about rotating the site of action chemistry to reduce resistance. If we rely on only one type of action for an herbicide, our weeds develop resistance quicker. So they talk about using multiple methods of site of action. There are over 20 different site of action groups in the herbicide chemistry, and nearly 100 different chemistries total. So that just means there's this ever-growing array of herbicides being used on farmland, and we don't know what its long-term impact shifting to some of these new chemistries is going to be to trees. My guess is it's not going to be good. So injury is definitely increasing to trees and other non-target landscapes across Nebraska. I noticed this as a person who works in the community forestry side of our shop. I work with communities across the state. I travel this state and I see it with my own two eyes. And it's very clear to us, our district foresters get a lot of inquiries about herbicide damage to shelter belts and farmsteads. They're at ground zero because that's where the farm herbicide is being sprayed. But it branches out from there, injury to nursery plants, specialty crops, non-GMOs. I know several nursery growers in our state who have dealt with this problem and have had to file lawsuits to deal with it. Grape growers are especially hard hit. As we talked about woodlands here a little while ago, woodland restoration, another problem we've got to deal with now is injury to natural areas, our woodlands, our wetlands, and our prairies. It's getting worse every year. And then the world that I work within is community trees. And boy, do we see an ever increasing impact to community trees, even from farm spraying. This chemistry is getting into the air, mixing with the atmosphere and moving miles into our communities. So a place like this in Fremont, Nebraska, the edge of town, many of their oak trees are dying and other trees because of herbicide drift. I got to be careful with my creative language here, pardon my French, but our trees look horrible and we've forgotten what leaves are supposed to look like. Most people don't notice what's going on, but those of us who pay attention, we remember what a tulip tree leaf is supposed to look like, a bur oak leaf, or how about a red bud? These leaves don't look like this anymore across eastern Nebraska, much of Nebraska and the Midwest. It's really a sad fact of where our trees are at now. I am most close to this in Waverly, Nebraska, where I live. And I've taken my adult life and spent a lot of time in my spare time planting trees across the community. Not to brag, but I've had a hand in planting hundreds, maybe a couple thousands of trees in Waverly. We've planted an arboretum. We've planted across our school sites and street trees. I've put a lot of my adult effort into that. And I got to tell you, it rocks my soul. It hurts me deep within inside me to see what's happening to our trees. I often look around and I say, my trees. I spent my adult life planting you and caring for you, and now you're looking like crap. And I got to tell you, it is demoralizing to me. It's sucking the enthusiasm for trees out of me, to be quite honest with you. I hate the thought of that, but I almost hate to go home and spend time in the park now, because this is what our trees look like here, at least in Waverly and eastern Nebraska. It is frustrating. And the epicenter of this damage is the impact on oaks. We really see it almost most prominently on oaks. For some reason, oaks must be unfurling their leaves right at the time when farm applications are happening in April and May, and those young tissues are most prone to this herbicide drift damage. So here's a white oak. This is in the heart of Lincoln, University of Nebraska East Campus. Look what the curled leaves like. Look at the thin canopy. And let's remember what these leaves are supposed to look like. Here's bur oak, our best oak across Nebraska. Do we remember what a bur oak is supposed to look like? Even here in Nebraska, a bur oak leaf should be as big as our hands and almost look like a hand. It's not the stunted, twisted, cruddy foliage that we see early in the season. One thing we notice is that early season flush of leaves are really truncated and distorted. And then second season flush of leaves later in the seasons can be a little bit more on the normal side, but they often still look rough. This is what a bur oak leaf is supposed to look like. How about red oak with that distinctive cupping over? Or how about, here's pin oak, northern pin oak, or hills oak, Quercus ellipsoidalis. This is what red oak is supposed to look like. This is what northern pin oak is supposed to look like. Please show me here in eastern Nebraska trees that don't have this distorted foliage. They don't all look like this, but I would guess most of them do, or the majority of them do, especially in small towns and anything near a farm operation. Shingle oak here on the left, Quercus montana chestnut oak here on the right. In my experience, I do see less injury on a couple of oaks. Quercus bicolor, the swamp white oak, has for some reason a little less damage. And then I notice little less damage on chinkapin oak. I don't know what's going on there physiologically, why those species have less damage, but it's not that they have none. They just are a little less damaged than the others. It's not just oaks. There's other species involved here, and the real canary in the coal mine to me is redbud. I don't know if I've seen a redbud look normal for the last 20 years. I used to love the redbuds with their big heart-shaped leaves coming out and announcing spring. This is what the early season leaves now look like in redbud pretty much throughout eastern Nebraska. Here's one on campus. The heart-shaped leaves later in the season that are coming out look almost okay, but this is what most of the leaves look like. Tell me how a redbud is supposed to photosynthesize and store enough food energy to continue its life processes when this happens every year. And in fact, in Waverly, we're seeing pretty rapid decline of red buds that are going out of the landscape. So here's a picture of a red bud leaf or leaves I took in Tennessee a couple weeks ago. I travel quite a bit to Eastern United States and Virginia. And when I'm away from farm country, the leaves look fine, even in our communities, even where herbicides are applied to lawns. So that's telling me quite a bit of what we're up against here in Nebraska. Kentucky coffee tree. You could throw a football through this coffee tree here on campus with its thin canopy and distorted leaves. This is what a coffee tree leaf, that's one leaf, a bipinnately compound leaf, is supposed to look like. How about green ash or tulip tree? How about yellowwood here on the left? This really elongated, very leathery, veinal kind of distortion is typical of 2,4-D, whereas dicamba is often more of a cupping injury, but combined together, you almost can't tell them apart. And I'd see less damage on maples than other genus, but we still see some damage on maples when it was thick in the atmosphere near maples, and that was a sugar maple. Less so on evergreens. It has to be pretty thick in the atmosphere to cause damage to evergreens that I've seen, but adjacent to farm fields, here's a concolor fir, and here's a Pinus strobiformis, southwestern white pine, that are really curled from herbicide drift. Those are just a few pictures of what we're up against, but we have more questions than answers ultimately. We need more data and research to better understand the problem. Unfortunately, we're still guessing at a lot of what's going on here. Even though we've collected some data, we always need more. Also, I ask this question to myself all the time. What is the available research telling us not only about tree health, but human health? We are breathing this air. If our trees are expressing this problem from atmospheric drift, we are breathing those same chemicals. That can't be good for us. I wouldn't bet my arm that it causes cancer or anything like that, but we should ask those questions. Are there diseases, insects, or weather events that can mimic this herbicide injury or make it worse? We think this is mostly herbicide damage, but maybe there are other things involved, and we need to learn. What is changing in farm practices? What chemicals are involved? We generally know what the most common chemicals are used on lawns and on farms: 2,4-D, dicamba, glyphosate, pachloram, triclopyr, MCCP, and others. But that chemistry is going to be changing fairly rapidly with herbicide resistant weeds, so we need to know what's going on there. What is the impact from lawn care? Again, we're just kind of guessing a little bit as some of these trees, is it lawn care or is it farm applications that are causing the problem? And how do we approach this problem where agriculture is so prominent and important? We cannot vilify agriculture here in Nebraska and Iowa and the Midwest. It's the lifeblood of who we are. So let's not vilify agriculture, but we need to have agriculture at the table to help us figure out any solutions we might have. In my worst days, I look at this and I say, there's nothing we're going to be able to do. Why bother? But I don't want to give up because I love these trees that I've helped plant and that I've watched grow and helped other communities plant. And they really are great for our society and for future generations. So let's not give up. We can learn more information on the Forest Service website. Herbicide Damage to Trees is a page that we have up. Lori Stepanek worked hard on pulling that together so we can learn about damage symptoms, sources of herbicide exposure, steps you can take, and then other videos. And you can report damage. There's a herbicide damage reporting system. You can go on the website of the Nebraska Forest Service and send in reports. But I'll tell you what, if you would just send me your personal images or comments about damages you've seen, I'd appreciate that. I'm trying to catalog some of this just so we can tell what's going on. And then if you see drift happening, please try to report that to the Nebraska Department of Agriculture and document the event, the date, the weather that was going on that day, wind speed, take some images, and you'll get online and you can call the Department of Ag and report it. It's important to do that. You'll see that the Department of Ag has very little teeth to do much, but they can fine the people that have been spraying outside the boundaries of what's normally allowed by the label. And that helps. That helps. When people get bit a little, it does help. And then talk to offenders and make them aware. This includes people in your own neighborhood if they're spraying the lawn and it damaged your trees. And it includes the co-op if they've been spraying outside of wind boundaries and that kind of thing. So please don't get shot doing that, but we can't be quiet trying to talk to each other to limit this damage. So with that, I will stop the share. And if there are any questions, I will take them, but we're running behind and I'm happy to turn this over to the next group, Lori or David.
Yeah, you bet, Justin. Alan had a question. At the individual level, if we buy organic products, that helps create demand for more organic farming potentially. You know, there are herbicides that are compliant with organic farming certification, if I understand that properly, but might minimize some of the more problematic herbicide use that's out there. I don't know that we're going to ever get to a place where we're growing organic corn and beans, but you know, stranger things have happened, I guess. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm frustrated because I personally like these herbicides. I spray a lot of Roundup in my landscape care in Waverly, and it's a great grass killer to keep beds and things clean as we try to get better landscapes developed. But we just got to be smart about it. And I do feel like if we're smart about it and follow label directions, use it sparingly, even our growth regulator herbicides are okay. But when you come out of your house and you can smell it in the air, you've done something wrong. And so this is a tough nut to crack because I'm not sure that organic herbicides accomplish the same things, but I'm the first to say we don't need to spray nearly as much lawn herbicide as we do. So yeah. I got to tell you, I don't spray lawn herbicides. And the best thing we can do, if we're like in a park or a school site, please tell your land managers to just do that dandelion control in the fall. In fact, you can wait till a frost or two happens and then go after your dandelions because the grass is going dormant. The other weeds are dormant. You can get that dandelion without any problem after a couple frosts. So
and your application spray. Well, and that application is more effective in fall anyways.
Yep.
So great point there. How about people that have trees that have been impacted by herbicide drift? Aside from having a better relationship with your neighbor, seeing whether you can do something about their spraying practices, what can we do to give the tree a better shot at long-term success?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do other than do everything we can going forward to keep the tree happy and healthy. So anything we would normally say, like if it's in a drought period, give it a little bit of water, don't overwater it, don't bump it with the mower, don't over fertilize around it, and then be careful about pruning. Don't open a lot of pruning wounds on it when you don't have to. Right. Just that simple stuff. But I'm not aware that there's much after an event that can happen. The good thing about these trees, these oaks especially, they're so tough and adaptable. They'll take quite a bit of this abuse, just like the bur oak blight. They'll take quite a bit of that abuse. But I do think we're going to start to see actually bur oak blight-like decline in some of our trees from herbicide year after year. So stop it, and then maybe the future is better.
Yeah, another commenter mentioned that there's some, there's some legal action around dicamba being restricted or banned in other states. I don't know if we have Julie or anybody else from Department of Ag that could speak to that potential here in Nebraska or other states that our audience is from or not. But I haven't heard of any such plans here in Nebraska.
This is my guess. If you follow the politics of it, there's not going to be any banning of dicamba, but there might be changes in the label allowances for how it's applied. The problem with this, what dicamba gets a bad rap for right now is the post-emergent use over dicamba-resistant beans. And that adds another layer of damage to our trees. But dicamba has been a part of the mixture of spring burn down for decades. And I don't think there will be any regulatory pressure to change that. So it's not going away anytime soon, would just be my best guess.
Right.
But I can't read the future on that. Our country, the politics just are not there to ban some of this chemistry. I really do hope, though, that the system, the agricultural system, you know who complains the most about damaged trees is other farmers. They don't like to see their farm trees damaged. And I'm hoping that the system, the agricultural system, figure out better mechanics and better chemistries to help us solve this.
Yeah, because it really is hard to find a day in Nebraska where it's not over 80 degrees and 15-mile-an-hour winds. The off-label applications are a problem. Hard to know how a farmer would effectively spray their fields and stay on label at the same time.
Yeah, and I don't think you can, to be quite honest, because a lot of even when you spray within the label window, the chemical is still on the ground or on the foliage, and it does actually end up volatilizing and moving into the atmosphere later on. And now it's just kind of ubiquitous in the air and moving, whether you did everything right or not, is my guess. I got to say, I'm guessing at that, but that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I'll also throw out some conjecture that I've heard with an asterisk that it hasn't been proven by research that I know of, where herbicide will settle on dirt roads. The dust gets kicked up with vehicle traffic, settles on tree leaves, and then is reactivated with the next rain event at low levels.
Yeah, that's right on. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of comments in the chat about seeing impacts to sycamore as well, as just another one of those species that you can see that leaf curl during those spring and early summer applications.
Yeah.
And then Anita says, I do some lawn care, but I let my customer know in the beginning that I look at and take care of the entire landscape and won't spray a lawn solid with a herbicide if there are trees close, because of the uptake in the roots of the trees. I do spot spray, which, being human, will miss some weeds. And if the customer can't live with my philosophy, they need to find someone else. And good on you, Anita. You have to consider herbicides. They're a legitimate tool to have in your belt, but there's a responsible way that we use that tool.
Yeah, spot spraying of dandelions, I don't think is a big problem.
Yeah. Good discussion. Thanks for sharing that with us, Justin. More to come on that, I think, how it develops, but this is something that we're probably going to have to learn to deal with and live with for the time being.
Yep.
Excellent.
You
definitely earned your donut for the day.
All right.
Okay, guys.